So we've been talking the last few classes about the recognition aspect, recognizing awareness. We've been developing that theme, that idea. There's a point in the practice where there is enough calm, there is enough experience, there is enough mindfulness present. And we begin to hone our attention in on that aspect of knowing. I was saying last week, we start to get a sense of it being in the room, if you will, and start to get a sense of it tapping you on the shoulder. Start to get a sense of its closeness, its proximity. And in that place, we begin to even more so let go of our ideas about what should be, about the way things should be, about how our practice should be. Somebody wrote this week in, they're doing very well, but one of the points was they don't think they had as much calm in the last few months as they have as they had previously. But yet, in in the uh, in the letter they wrote, in the email they wrote, um, it was apparent that they had a lot less clinging, that things didn't grab onto them in the same way, that the old hooks that forever uh, were were sticking to them, grabbing onto them, had over time lost their perhaps power, their stickiness. That's what's important. A calm will come and go. Concentration will come and go. You'll have a good retreat. You'll have a retreat that is a lot more difficult. You'll have a good day. You'll have a day that's a lot more difficult. But the measure is in our response to what's taking place. I love concentration. I love being in a deep state of spacious calm. Who doesn't? But those are factors that we develop so we can get to this place of a undistracted mind that easily recognizes in moments this pure awareness factor. So there's a point in the practice where we're paying a lot more attention to that. Where we're paying a lot more attention to that. It's still important to sit. It's still important to develop one-pointed concentration to the best of our ability, because that creates an energetic field within the body mind. It creates an energetic field that allows us to open to this awareness. So we continue with this practice of grounding, of watching the breath, of meditating, working with mindfulness. But we begin to understand that essentially that's not the essence of the practice. The essence of the practice is this recognition. And the only way for this recognition to truly occur is through not holding on to anything. Is to really let go. So the meditation takes us to that point, as I was saying last week, takes us to that room. And in that room, we're present. We're present with ourselves. I was a short while ago, I was preparing for the talk, and I was thinking about my time with Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj. And I think most of you know who he is by now. His book was his book, which I was talking about for the book club, or one of the suggestions is, I never know how these cameras work. Yeah, like that. It always goes the wrong way. Anyway, that's one of his famous books, and I do have a photograph of him. This is so he was I don't know how well you can see that. Anyway, he was also known as the Beedi Baba, and because he had a beedi shop, which are hand rolled Indian cigarettes. Um, those were back in the good old days. Yeah, I used to finish a retreat and buy a pack of beedies, cough your face off, and think, why am I smoking these? Anyway, so he lived in Bombay, Mumbai, and he had a second story built on his house where he lived with his family, and he taught from that second. He taught from that room. He gave satsang a couple of times a day, in the morning and the evening. And he is one of the most incredible beings that I've ever met. Um, but what came up for me this evening when I was thinking about him is he had a room where there's maybe 25 or 30 people. There were Indians, locals, and Westerners. He was very well known within certain circles of Western Dharma practitioners. Anyway, you would when you came in, you would come up the stairs, and he would be sitting right near the stairs, and he'd watch you come in, and he was often smoking a beedi, and he'd just kind of look at you like that. And he had sticks of incense that were burning all the time, and the room was packed. The room was packed with Indians and Westerners. And I was very young and very new to this whole thing. Um, anyway, I was traveling with a friend of mine, and first day or two, first couple of days, my friend was asking a lot of questions. He was older than me. Everybody was older than me in those days. And we'd go back to the hotel room. It's like, Jack, you got to ask him some questions. But I was far too shy. I was far too shy to ask questions. But Anyway, I finally did. And I'm at the back of the room and I asked a question. And he looked at me and he said, stand up. He made me stand up. I just wanted to disappear. He made me stand up, stand up. And then he said, say your question again. But of course, it's all through a translator. Anyway, I said I forgot my question, but really I was just joking with him. I had a sense of I had a sense of humor then, too, apparently, and he laughed and I laughed, and then he said, "Come here," and he made me sit right in front of him. And it's very intimidating to be around, or for me anyway, I think for most people, to be around somebody with such a penetrating wisdom and an obvious energy field that was unlike any I think I had seen up to that point, or I'd had the grace to be in the grace of. Anyway, so we continued on. So I went to see him for a couple of weeks, and for the first week or 10 days, whenever I came in the room, he made me sit in front of him, right? Uh, I was a young Canadian boy. Where's that young Canadian boy? And he made me sit right in front of him, like right in front of him. And we would have a dialogue. He would ask me questions, and through his questionings, he would bring you to a point of a deep seeing. He would bring you to a point of a deep seeing in that moment, and he would challenge you as well. So he would question you and question you and question you, and it was all very incredibly exciting and dynamic, and really scary as well. And then I was thinking about it just, like an hour ago, or um, and it was like, so, and I'm thinking about what I'm doing with this class. I'm thinking about what we're trying to achieve here. And I was thinking about it in the context with my uh, relationship with Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj and my time with him. And on one level, it's courage. It's the courage to be with ourselves. It's the courage to face the truth in any given moment. We spend a lot of time dithering our time away. A lot of time just kind of following these lazy thought patterns that really don't lead anywhere. And we can spend a lot of time avoiding ourselves and avoiding what's uncomfortable. And it's not like we have to stick our hand in a pail of hot water, but we have to be willing to be with ourselves. We have to be willing to be with our fragility and our patterns and our fears and the things that hurt. We have to be able to be in the room with them. And with my time with Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, a big part of what he did was he allowed you to sit in the face of this vastness, which can be terrifying. And you knew it was okay. There's this tremendous love that was there. The universe supports us. The universe supports us. But when we're not willing to show up, when we're not willing to have that courage, then we mostly end up running from shadows. You know that story, that line, being afraid of your own shadow. But in the context of the teaching, in the context of being with Maharaj, there was this tremendous um, presence that was interwoven into the fabric of one's experience. So even though we have to look and face, there's a lightness to it, there's a brightness to it. He was a very forceful being. He was very forceful. And sometimes people would walk up the stairs, and there was something about him that he didn't think they were ready. And he would just tell them to leave. And the person would stop, and everybody in the room would be shocked. And there would be something about this person, and he'd just say, go. And they would have to go. So there was this energy of the sword that was always in the room. And I remember I said something about an experience. And he said, well, if that's true, you wouldn't, one thing or the other, you wouldn't be here. I don't know if it was you wouldn't be here. Anyway, he asked me about something, and I told him about this experience. Because what would happen is during the day, you would have these experiences would be moving through you. And he looked at me and he challenged me. And he was basically saying, are you making this up? Right? Like just like that. And I wasn't. And I said, the experience came and the experience went. And he was like, okay, I believe you. But you were on edge. And not unlike with Namjo Rinpoche. Not unlike with Namjo Rinpoche. Um, there's a quote somewhere about how the best teacher shows you your hidden faults. And certainly Namjo Rinpoche was like that. Sri Nisargadatta, there was, I spent 2 weeks with him, and his way was he would show you, he would bring you to a point of experience, show you something, and then tell you to leave. He didn't want people hanging around, which I always found interesting too. Uh, Quite a number of the teachers that I met in India, they weren't looking for students. They just wanted to present the Dharma, and they wanted you to get it. They wanted you to get it. That's all they were interested in. But they also demanded from you. It wasn't, it was, it took courage. It took courage to be in the room with them. And it took courage to jump into the practice. So when we talk about what we've been doing over the year, and when we talk about this recognition factor, you can't have the recognition factor unless you show up. Unless you show up. And we can't pick and choose when we show up. right? We just have to show up again and again and again. Bring ourselves to this presence again and again and again. And you should feel a little uncomfortable at times with the practice. You should, when you're doing the practice, you should have days where you feel vulnerable and you feel shaky. You should have days where you don't feel very together at all. You should have days where you seem to be the pinnacle of imperfection. But can you show up for that? Can we just be with that? Because when we develop the capacity, and that's what we've been doing with all these practices, when we develop the capacity and we have the courage and we can show up, then this recognition factor starts to show up as well. Remember the image from last week? It's from a Japanese poem. Uh, it's what's the Japanese poem? Zenru, Zenru, boy, your food is yummy, yummy, yummy. I like it in my tummy. I just made that up for those who know Zenru. But it's the idea of the water that's moving through the stream and it's going under rocky crevices and it's going over mossy boulders and clumps of sticks. And at some point, going through all of these parts of the river, it becomes pure and transparent water. And that's like us. When we bring attention to what's taking place, when we have the courage to show up for ourselves again and again and again, then we start to become clear and transparent. That's a recognition factor. And clarity, transparency. There's nothing between us and the experience anymore. We're not running from the shadows. So, with all this in mind, the work that we've been doing together is of great value. And there are times when it's easy, there's times when it's really scary, and there's times where it's incredibly joyful. And how do we know it's working? There's less hooks. The things that used to pull us down don't pull us down so much anymore. Mental states come and go, experiences come and go. But there starts to be this recognition within us. I'm using recognition in a different way now. Starts to be this recognition within us that those old patterns, even though they may still be in operation, they don't grab us in the same way. They don't grab us in the same way. And that is everything. That experience is the experience of moving towards enlightenment. It is. How do you know? How do you know? How do I know? How do you know that I know? How do you know the Buddha knows? The only thing we can know is our own experience. And if you do this work and you show up day after day, there's more clarity, there's more transparency. We see the hook for the hook.